So I had an idea to have myself on camera, do the rage bit, yada yada, but it's not worth it. So I'm just gonna use clips for a certain question I have.
What's wrong with you?
So if for some odd reason you couldn't tell by now, I really hate this godforsaken, miserable pile of dung. And I really wish I didn't because I was looking forward to it. Trust me, I knew it wasn't going to be as good as the first or third games, but I was still somewhat hopeful. It was made by the same people who worked on Game 3, and that is one of my favorite games of all time. Even if the gameplay suffered here, I could enjoy the plot at least. Well, that was what I thought would happen. I mean, the signs were all there that told me otherwise, and were warning sirens blaring harder than a boss alert in Mega Man X. The game will be released at $40 with a first edition, free DLC, and of course rather middling scores. I have never seen a game such get a unanimous 6 out of 10. Sadly, I think even that score is far too generous for this game. Now I should note I could have technically beaten this game, but I chose not to. Why? Because even I have more self-respect for myself than to play this game ever again, and I suffered through Parasite Eve 2 and 3. I'm sorry, but unless you pay me for this stuff, I am not being that masochistic. Also, it's boring. So boring, I had to include this clip.
Boring.
The story is sadly the first on the chopping block. It's a damn shame too, since the concept sounds really damn interesting. It's about a group of orphans who lose their caretaker thanks to the obviously evil empire, so they manipulate an entire country through various methods like the news, military, and more to go to war so they can get their revenge. That sounds incredible! Well, aside from the part where the teacher and some student are talking about the past events, as that constantly interferes with the pacing of the game, and you are kinda spoiled at the ending of the story because of it. Plus, for some bizarre reason, for a PlayStation 4 game, there are some fairly long loading screens after some cutscenes, and serve only to remind me of Sonic 06. Admittedly not as bad, but if you were reminding me of that game, I'd say you screwed up somewhere along the line. Sometimes the teacher even receives letters and I'm wondering how this is happening in the span of a day when they are talking about the past. It bothers me more than it has any right to. As for the cutscenes, yeah, these are long and there are too many. And I say this as a guy who freaking defends story to his dying breath in video games. Now to be fair, the Persona games, especially 5, have a lot of dialogue and scenes before you are given control of the player. The beginnings of those games can often last over 2 hours before finally settling into the gameplay. At least properly. The difference with that and Valkyria Revolution is that the former can tell an interesting story and sometimes can make me forget so much time is passing due to how enjoyable it is. The latter, however, makes me realize how long it is by failing to be interesting, or even worse, constantly repeating the same damn plot points, making it feel like a damn crawl. Here's an example of what I mean. Like, you see the prince here? Be prepared to meet him a ton with only a teeny tiny bit of development between the characters. Maxim here also lacks any sympathy or understanding for his needs, so he comes across as very annoying. There is free DLC that supposedly expands his character, even makes him playable, but you cannot touch it until you beat the game. Speaking of, they do try to give some DLC to show more character interactions and funny scenarios. These are executed poorly. The ideas are sound and cliche, but the execution is boring as I suddenly realize these models just mostly stand around and don't do much. Let's take this one cutscene, where the princess is starving, and it's said she can easily go on a rampage if she doesn't get food. Aside from the hunger pains and the gang doing a really shit job of helping her, we see nothing. There's no payoff at all, and it just ends up being boring. I appreciate the attempts to try and add more character chemistry and stuff, but it was too little too late. In fact, all of this helps sell the idea that this game was rushed, maybe due to the negative feedback from the original demo. The cutscenes also bogged down the gameplay so much I actually started skipping them just to rush to the end of the game. By then, I knew I wasn't going to get a full review out of this, and if a story wastes 20 hours of your time with nothing interesting, chances are that the next 20 will fail to do that as well. Even then, it's mostly repeated the same damn plot points over and over again, that there was no real harm in me skipping them anyway. Some examples of the predictable plot, like say, a princess who can stop the Valkyria through singing, flashbacks, constantly talking about events that already happened, and so much more. Any of the more detailed stuff in the plot was clearly saved for the latter half. The trailers themselves could have been more interesting, but the storytelling just made me not care. This really needed more polish. Also, it's about time we address the elephant in the room. Brynhilder's tits are so absurdly big for her body type that it's really distracting. and not even in a good way like a Senran Kagura game. And don't expect the same kind of love that Valkyria got either, as we also don't know much outside of this character needing to repent for her sins, and whatever it is, it's likely in the last few chapters I refuse to finish. Naturally, they changed how the Valkyria works here too. So much so, I wonder if she's part vampire, given how she can only come out at night, and part Kesha due to her death music. There's also a game mechanic where wins and losses affect the world. How so? Well, when things are good, everything is bright and cheery. When things go bad, well, the color is drained, and that's it. There is a slight bit of gameplay changes with how you may not be able to buy certain materials if certain territories are lost, but given the limited upgrades, it barely affects anything, and it's not like you can deploy spare units or upgrade other parts of the army anyway. Also, some conflicts are resolved really damn quickly. Like how one guy asks the main hero if what they're doing is right. He just says yes, and everything is good. Why would we want character development after all? And there's one more thing I have to discuss, a certain spoiler, so I'll put a timer in the bottom and talk about it now. Godot, the sworn guardian of the princess, dies. Shock of shocks. Once they said he had a sister and how active she was in cutscenes, I knew what was going to happen in the future. I don't have an issue with him dying, as it was a good point in the story to kill him off, and honestly I like his sister more than him. No, my main issue is how he dies. Now in the game he is a shielder, someone meant to take on damage with a shield obviously, so of course when he decides to defend the main hero from getting killed, he doesn't use his goddamn shield. Look, I get that this is a Valkyria, so if she sliced through the shield and cut him down anyway, I'd be perfectly fine with that. For God's sake, Valkyria blew up regular tanks with a single shot. But this was just absurdly dumb, and I can't quite get it out of my head. And yet, it perfectly encapsulates how some of these characters do not think for 2 goddamn seconds. Congratulations, Digital Devil Saga 2. You have been bumped off my list over here because this is just... What the hell is wrong with you? Also, don't expect Dark Sins to appear in this game. There is very little, if any, terminology from previous games used here. You got Ragnite at best, and the Valkyria this time dresses like the Grim Reaper. It's a spin-off and I'm okay with that, but only because there's so much crap in my face that this is the game's least damaging problems, like a fly compared to a swarm of angry hornets. But I will say anything new it tries to do, it just comes across as boring. The gameplay has changed up quite a bit as well, considering this time it's a third-person action game, focusing more on melee combat over using guns. That's not to say guns and grenades are useless, they are very helpful, but this time limited with ammunition. And unlike in the original Valkyria Chronicles, any gun can be used for any person in the party. What about ace weapons, I hear you say? After all, there are aces in this game. The original series gave you weapons for defeating such foes. Though honestly, Game 1's ace weapons were god-awful, while they were amazing in Game 3. Given how long I explain this crap, it should come as no surprise that there are no ace weapons. Weapons do differentiate from one another with ammo and stats, but that's it. Although here's a tip if you're for some odd reason playing this game. Only use explosive weapons against the Valkyria. Bullets do crap unless specified, and even then, I think those weapons suck. Now with enemies using guns mostly, which is a good amount, you'd think this will be a problem. Well, not really. The guns barely do any damage. The guns were only ever terrible when I went solo, and noticing my character being demoralized for some bizarre reason despite, cleaving through soldiers almost as easily as Dynasty Warrior minion fodder. It's only after that point did I really start to take damage and was unable to dish it out in time. This was a rare loss for me though, since I had no backup, and this status doesn't become that much of a factor ever again. It happens to the grunts too often as well, so it makes killing them even easier with stuff like grenades. However, you may not even use firearms until much later, given the fact that your basic melee can smack away foes easily. The AP meter this time is represented by this circle. The morale at the top determines the speed, and once you attack, you strike a set number of times before stopping, so the combo can't really be controlled after being used. Now of course these combos change between each character, which brings me to the classes. The Shock Trooper is usually the main attacker, capable of staying in a fight fairly long and dish out damage like a boss. The Scout is the glass cannon version, and usually has attacks to dash through foes, but I never found much use for them as a result of their low defense. I only kept one around since Ovelia was a vital member of the story. The Shielder, well, has a high defense and their attack is sorta okay. Again, another class I didn't really use that much. And finally the Sapper, which is basically the mage. They can also disarm mines for some reason, at least once I stopped running into them, and I only ever carried one of each class and that served me perfectly fine. You can also fine-tune the AI, but you only get specific commands after viewing certain events. And yes, the game thankfully still has the character-specific side stories when you use a unit enough times. With the exception of the main characters, everyone can gain benefits to their passive skills. And I only bring this up because this too had little effect on the gameplay. The only benefit I could say was I could make sure my allies didn't waste magic or just simply focus on healing. Otherwise, switching to everyone using their abilities was just far more effective. Still, there is little room for strategy. Sometimes even the hitboxes are inaccurate, and I can hit enemies slightly out of it, and they can do the same to me. Time also stops, and given how easy it is to spam these skills, fights aren't even difficult unless dealing with a boss. And even then, it's boring as hell.
Boring.
Speaking of magic, yeah, that's a thing now. Actually common here as opposed to being super rare in the Valkyria Chronicles series. And even then, that was limited to only Valkyria powers per select individuals. Now, any character can use a spell, but there are limitations. For starters, each character has their element ranked, which can be increased by upgrading your weapons. The higher it is, they can equip stronger spells. This does help make sure each character can be unique, and it's not bad so far, right? However, they are mostly the same damn attacks, just with different elemental properties, and also mostly situational since, once again, a grenade is almost just as effective. Plus, a lot of these spells, they're gonna be lost since they are needed in actually upgrading these weapons. At least focusing on 4 characters made the decision easy on who to upgrade. Now, relying on such a small number of characters would normally be dangerous, with one other condition I did not mention. This game features permadeath, which was taken out of the second and third Valkyria Chronicles games. Should a character not be revived after their time limit is up, and unless they are a main character due to, well, main character shields, then they are considered dead for the rest of the game. There's just one problem with this system. Well, okay, there's multiple problems, but the real problem is that it doesn't really matter since I did not lose a single character. At least not until towards the end of the game when the game just became a pain in the ass to play. Even then, if someone did die, I found out they will be replaced with a generic soldier and their stats are perfectly fine. And the real kicker, this changes nothing about the main story. According to other people, they still appear in the cutscenes. Then again, it may not bother others due to the lack of presence in the real meat of the plot. Nothing about this game really feels unique, not even the magic. And here's a real kicker about spells. You get them randomly after battles. You can definitely buy them for sure, but they won't be the same kind of spells you would want at your current level, as those abilities will not have a boosted power or added effects. There's really no point in buying these, especially when money goes away really damn fast should you choose to upgrade your guns and other weapons. In other words, if I threw myself in enough times at free battles, I could have gained the necessary skills to defeat certain bosses with surprising ease. Hell, that's actually what happened earlier in the game until I stopped. You can use Ragnite Gain after doing achievements and missions to gain more of these spells, but it's all done at random, reminding me of a loot box. Only crappier. How hard is it to program something that can allow you to buy what you need? Speaking of bosses, those fights were the closest thing that required strategy, and even then, it's mostly just, oh god, how are they doing all this shit? Well, that's mostly the fights against the Valkyria, but no matter what, these fights take way longer than they should at times, becoming a goddamn endurance test. Some can be pretty easy, but there are a few hard ones that are just awful to play. There's one I did not record with a giant rail robot that's constantly in the air and requires long-range weaponry to get some good hits as it rarely comes down, and just throws down waves and waves of grunts that require a huge beating. And even when it does come down, the wind keeps blowing you back, and it has so much damn health that the entire fight just becomes a horrible mess. But hey, that was just one boss out of a couple, right? Surely there's nothing worse. It gets worse. There's this one, the twin snake, that made me look at this game and say, yeah, I don't want to play this anymore. Let me explain. See, it's a double boss, a mechanical snake with 2 heads that's also one of those bosses that requires that both heads be taken down at the same time. Take down one head, after a while it will just revive. Now, most games with better design will have 2 health bars to help indicate how much damage needs to be done for each enemy and help in managing your attacks. This game does not do that, and keep in mind, this is also another one of those bosses where physical attacks hurt one head and magic hurts the other. How does this make sense?
There's a simple explanation for that.
This boss is a microcosm for everything wrong with this game. Bosses being damage sponges, too much crap going on all at once, range frames for attacks being pointless, your AI being really dumb a lot of the time, and needing specific skills that you cannot just buy because the best ones have to be earned at random, because that makes frigging sense. You know, except for the part where it doesn't. But here's the thing, when I recorded this, I finally beat the boss on my second attempt, since I wasn't going to suck on purpose while doing this video. Last thing I needed was to become the new Cuphead guy. How did I do it? Spamming. I spammed the living hell out of every skill and gun I had on me since the game left me no other choice. What followed was a fight that took me nearly half a goddamn hour. Using nothing but the same 2 skills over and over gets really damn dull. If this is what I had to look forward to for the rest of the game, especially considering that's how it worked in earlier boss fights going on for so damn long, then I didn't want to play. I was done. Period. This game that is supposed to possess some form of tactics failed at even that.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
And thus ends my rant on this game. I have absolutely no desire to pick this game back up, and I already sold it. I don't even want the soundtrack nor the pin. I don't want anything to remind me of this disaster of a game. Honestly, I had more fun with Mighty No. 9. I'll even take the reboot of DMC for God's sake. And it sucks. It really sucks that I feel this way. I didn't want to give up, but honestly, I should have a long time ago. Especially when I put in over 30 hours in this game. Sheesh. My only saving grace is that I still have plenty of good games ahead of me. I still want Game 3 to be brought over here. And yeah, I'm sure critics will be harsh on the repeat stages and other stuff, but it's still the best in the series by far. Even if it's a Japanese dub, I take it, if only to make sure others got to see it for the awesome story. But hey, we are getting Valkyria Chronicles 4 at least. I just really don't want to go back to the combat of the first game, or at least have that stupid delay when deploying units. I'm the smartest moron, and now I will cleanse the foul taste in my mouth with real shooting games. Or RPGs, I don't know. My recording schedules have been insane as of late.